Hi, welcome to my channel Mostly Knitting. If you're a returning viewer, thank you so much for coming back. And if you're new here, I'm Tash, and this is a weekly podcast where I talk mostly about the knitting that I've been doing during the week, and I also put out regular tutorials. So this video is a wrap up of all the accessories that I knit in 2024. I already did a video on the garments that I knit in 2024, and I'll put a link to that in the description below. And this video I'll run through anything that's not a garment, so scarves, shawls, socks, a few washcloths and a Christmas bauble. In 2024 I finished 5 scarves or shawls, 21 hats, 8 pairs of socks. I made 7 washcloths, 4 of them were knit and 3 of them crocheted, and 1 Christmas bauble which I crocheted. So I'll start with the shawls. This is my largest shawl for sure. It's the half and half triangles wrap, and I knit it out of, so it's a free pattern by Purl Soho, and I knit it out of the recommended yarn, which is Purl Soho Linen Quill in the colorway Bird's Egg Blue and Red Poppy. Even though that's called Red Poppy, I'd say it's bordering on orange. It's somewhere sort of between orange and red, a very, very orangey red if you're going to call it red. Anyway, I really like it. I think it's really lovely. I started with a different color, Vintage Celadon, I think, and Red Poppy, and I just didn't like those two together, but I really love this sort of icy blue with the Red Poppy. I knit the large size, which is a cast on of 260 stitches, and as a result it uses, you know, a bit into the a reasonable amount into the second skein, but not a lot. So this weighs 467 grams, and because the balls were a bit more than 100 grams, I really only use maybe about 20 grams of each of the third skein. So I have a really large amount left over of 1 skein of each one. I believe there is a different, because there's no magic in the number 260, there's no repeat or anything, you can cast on whatever you want. So if you wanted to get it out of 2 skeins, I believe there's some people who've done that on Ravelry. If you look up, there might be just like a cast on number, maybe 240. I can't remember exactly, so don't quote me, you'd have to look it up. But one that should get it out of 2 skeins. Obviously that will be a bit smaller, but it will be close, you know, pretty large, but just not exactly as large as this, but then you won't have as many leftovers. So this one is 41 inches square, and it is really large. Like it's really lovely and cozy and warm. I'll put some pictures of myself with it around me. It's kind of like a wearable blanket. I do know some other people have styled it really nicely with a belt and whatever, more like almost like a coat really around them. You know, but it's obviously a very warm and cozy shawl, and it took quite a long time, but it was very, very easy. I did, so it's mainly, you know, you do one color and then you do the other color. I did wrap and turn short rows, which is what the pattern is written for, but then a lot of people I know have altered it to German short rows. A lot of people have also done I-cord edging. I chose not to do I-cord edging. I chose to do, I did do something different though. So I do find with garter, if you're just doing, you know, garter with nothing on the edging, you can end up with the edge just flaring a little bit, because that edge stitch, when it doesn't have another stitch on the other side of it, can be just a little bit, untidy. So what I did was I slipped the first stitch knitwise and then kept knitting. What that does is if you slip it and knitwise, and I didn't move the yarn to the front or anything, so as a result, you can see the edge still looks like garter. If you move the yarn to the front and then slip it knitwise, you then get like a sort of a scalloped slip stitch edge, but then it doesn't look like garter on the end. And I actually wanted it to look like garter on the end, but just look a bit tidier. So that was my little modification. Other than that, I knit it to pattern. I just used a long tail cast on for it. And, you know, I did the wrap and turn short rows, and yep, it's really lovely and cozy and warm and large. The second shawl that I have to show you is Dotted Rays by Stephen West, and it's this really lovely shawl that is very easy to make, really well written pattern. It's the second time that I've made it. This time I made it out of Dingo Dye Works Jumbuck. She's no longer dyeing, but I got this on D-Stash, and this color is called Coring, which is this lovely gray with some pink flecks. And yeah, very straightforward pattern. You start up here and you, like, your rows get longer and longer. You use a lot of short rows, and I put stitch markers in to make it just less counting. And yeah, that just made it a really easy project. I made the small size, but through weighing my yarn, I worked out that I would have enough left to do one more wedge. So you can just, depending on how much yarn you have, you can add extra wedges. I will say I was a little bit worried about how much yarn the bind off would use, because the top has this I-cord edge and the bind off is an I-cord bind off, which actually uses quite a lot of yarn. My bind off used 6.4 grams. So this weighs 192 grams. So I managed to get it out of 2 skeins with just a little bit extra to make it a bit larger. Interestingly enough, I have not actually worn this yet. Not because I don't like it, but I already have another, I think my Birds of a Feather shawl is sort of a similar grey, and it sort of fits the same place in my wardrobe. So I'd say, because, I mean, I love it, but because I haven't worn it and because I already have something that's sort of, I mean, I really enjoyed knitting it. I don't regret knitting it, but I think I might end up gifting it to someone, you know, because I haven't worn it, and, you know, maybe there's somebody else who doesn't have a grey shawl like this in their wardrobe. So that's my second shawl finished object. My third shawl for 2024 is Pure Joy by Joji Locatelli, and I knit it out of skein yarn Classy. This colour is Mist and this colour is in the navy. And I think I bought in the Mist myself, and navy was a D-stash yarn. So yeah, I'm really happy with how this finished up, but it wasn't Pure Joy for me knitting it, mainly because I did a lot of just preempting what I thought the pattern was saying, as opposed to actually reading what the pattern was saying, and also keeping track of my rows. So once you're sort of in a rhythm of a section, there's a lot of short rows and it's pretty straightforward. But if you put it down sort of towards the end of a section, and like, because you've got yarn attached at both sides, that was probably the other thing that I didn't really love about it, was you had this blue yarn attached, the navy blue yarn, all the time. So even though you're working these really large sections here, you still had this other yarn attached. Just makes it more fiddly, and, you know, yarn at one end. So if you finish it off at around the end here, and you put it down and you haven't paid attention to where you are, it can be a bit confusing to be like, hang on, do I have any more of this to go, or am I working from this end? Or anyway, I got myself muddled up a few times. I also got myself muddled up thinking that the last wedge, I started another wedge of this color, not realizing that actually I was meant to, because it doesn't actually say in the pattern to cut this yarn. And yet see how you do keep switching. You switch to the navy, then you switch back. And here you switch to the navy and do this eyelet row, and you're not told to switch back, but you're also not told to cut this yarn. Look, I mean, Joji writes great patterns. If I actually just read the pattern, I would have been fine. But I just sort of went, oh yeah, that's right. After I do this eyelet, I switch colors, but it didn't tell you to switch colors. I just kind of autopiloted it. And then as a result, I really was knitting quite a lot into the second skein, because some people have said they needed to use a second skein of this main color. So I was prepared for that, and I had a second skein, but I was using so much, and I was like, surely this isn't right. Then I went back and read the pattern and went, oh, actually I was meant to cut the yarn here, and I did manage to get it well out of one skein. I mean, I didn't have heaps left over, but I definitely got, for me anyway, got it out of one skein of this, and then I used about 2/3 of a skein of the navy. I think if you just read the pattern, don't assume that it's like super, you know, straightforward, or just, there are some, you know, they call, like in MasterChef, pressure points. So just when your pressure point is when you're sort of ending one of these sections and about to change, just really read it and make sure. And also, because of all the short rows, I also use stitch markers just so that there was less counting, because quite often you're knitting until 5 stitches before the previous wrap and turn or whatever. Oh, that was the other thing. It has wrap and turn short rows, but you don't pick up the wraps, which is not that uncommon using garter. But I just found where those turns are just a little bit untidy, and I'm not sure if I just wasn't, even though you can do a wrap and turn and not pick up the wrap in garter and it doesn't show, I think you do need to do the wrap pretty tightly. And because this yarn is silk, I think I just needed to maybe do my wraps just a little bit tighter than I was doing them. Anyway, I am happy with the end result. It's huge. The wingspan is 80 inches, and I can't remember if I said it, the finished object is 164 grams. So, and it actually looks really nice on. I haven't, I might have worn it once, but I do really like it. I don't really have anything that's kind of that navy color in shawls, so I think it did fill sort of a bit of a hole in my wardrobe, and I am really happy with the finished object. I just, yeah, that's just my word of warning. Just pay a little bit of attention to the pattern. My last two shawl/scarves are two Sophie scarves. I don't have them to show because I've already given both of them to my mum. One of them was knit out of Madeline Tosh Merino DK, which is a single ply DK weight merino yarn. Really lovely, it's got a really lovely shine on it. That one I knit the large size exactly to pattern, and it weighs 68 grams. I like this pattern because it's, you can actually weigh your yarn, knit to just less than half, and then knit the other direction, finishing. It's really easily memorized, but it is worth, because it can be a bit hard to tell when you've just done an increase or when you've just done a decrease, putting a stitch marker in the work just to keep yourself on track. I think if you do one slightly more off, if you miss it and you do one a little bit sooner than you should have or a little bit later, it's not the end of the world, but you wouldn't want to keep getting it off, or your scarf may look a little bit wonky. But yes, it was a good pattern, and at the time I think I was doing that, I was walking and knitting with that. So it is, as long as I had a stitch marker so I knew where I was, it's pretty easy and it's small and portable. This is a great project for leftovers because you can be sure through weighing your yarn that you're not going to run out, and it does take substantially less than one full ball of a standard DK weight yarn. Interestingly enough, the second one that I made out of Rowan Selects Patina, that one only weighs 26 grams, but I think that's mainly because, and even though I knit the large size, mainly because that particular yarn is incredibly lofty and very lightweight for the gauge and the yardage. So I wouldn't, that would not be a standard. I think if you've got about 70 grams left, you should be fine, in terms of making something that's actually wearable. Even if you weigh your yarn, if you've only got like 40 grams, it's not going to be a very big scarf. Although having said that, some people have chosen, if they don't have a lot of yarn, to not make it as wide. So instead of making a triangle, they do the increases just a little bit less than the full size, and then a trapezoid. So do straight, no increases or decreases, and then do your decreases. So it is quite a customizable pattern for whatever weight of yarn or whatever leftovers you happen to have. So I'll go through my hats now. In 2024, I knit 21 hats, which is a lot of hats, but I find they're great projects for using up leftovers or to try out a new yarn that you haven't tried before if you're considering it for a sweater but you're not sure either the gauge or if you'd like it in a sweater, to at least just make something functional and usable out of it before you make a larger investment. I also knit on them when I'm walking, so most of my hats are either going to be stockinette or ribbing, because then I can just walk on them, knit on them while I'm walking and doing something else at the same time, and then at the end of 5 or 6 walks I've got a hat. So a number of them are repeat knits. The Oslo Hat by Petite Knit, I knit 5 of in 2024. I had knit it for the first time in 2023 and I really liked it. So one of them I've already given away, but I'll put a picture of it up there. This was knit using Drops Alpaca, which is a sport weight yarn, along with a very thin strand of cashmere yarn that I bought in Japan. And yeah, I cast on the pretty standard size of 112 stitches and I followed the pattern. And the brim that I seem to like is knit it to 7 inches before I then do the fold. All of my Oslo hats, I do a crochet provisional cast on. That's not in the pattern, but that's just how I prefer to do it. It's really totally up to you. If you find it hard to pick up the stitches and from the cast on and knit them with the live stitch on the needle, this might be if you either find it hard to line up or your yarn's a very dark color, so even if you're actually fine with it, generally, if you have if you're doing it with black yarn, that can be quite hard to pick up. So you might want to consider using this method of doing a provisional cast on first, and then you unpick that cast on, put those live stitches on a needle and knit them together with the current stitches on your needles, to then do the folded brim. So that's it's an option anyway, right? So it's always good to know different ways of doing things. So that one weighed 83 grams, and yeah, I can't show you because it's given away. I do have one more that I can't show you that I've given to my son, and even though it's somewhere in the house, it's probably in the bottom of his bag, and that was using Fiddlesticks Peppin. So that yarn, Fiddlesticks Peppin, was in the colorway 1026, and it's this really great dark earthy sort of khaki green. It's he likes it and I really like it. I actually do have that yarn to show you in another project, so I can show you it in another, because I bought 5 skeins of it. So that particular version, because it's a heavier yarn, I cast on 96 stitches, and I used a larger needle for that one. I used a 4.5mm needle, and that hat weighs 117 grams. So that one actually, you know, is more than 100 gram skein. They come in 50 gram balls, but I certainly ate into the 3rd ball, so I needed more than 2 balls of. So if you're using a heavier yarn, this pattern, because it has a folded brim and then you turn it up, that's really a triple brim. So it does use more yarn than perhaps other hat patterns. I have 3 more here to show you. This one is another. This one's more a standard one with mohair. I used some yarn KFS in this sparkly yarn that's like an opal sort of sock yarn, and that was the main color. And then I used Rowan Kidsilk Haze with it. And this one, the rest of them are all 112 stitches. This one's on a 3.25mm needle. So this one weighs 80 grams. So I used 1 full ball of the Rowan Kidsilk Haze and pretty much the whole ball of the KFS Opal sock yarn. That was a 50 gram ball. So there's that one, and then I knit another one that looks quite similar but a much lighter pink. This one was knit with Knitting for Olive Merino and Soft Silk Mohair, both in the colorway Ballerina. These are both on a 3.25mm needle, 112 stitches. And I just managed to get this out of 1 ball of the Merino and the Soft Silk Mohair. You do have to pay a little bit of attention towards the end, just to make sure that you don't run out. You know, if you knit your brim just a little bit too long, or you knit this section a little bit too long, you will run out of yarn. So you do have to be a little bit careful. I do actually have a video on estimating the amount of yarn needed for the decreases, so I'll put a link to that in the description below. And then my final one that I knit for the year, I only just finished this recently. This was just in a straight DK weight yarn. I think I used a 3.5mm needle for this one. Again, 112 stitches. This is Lorna's Laces Swirl DK in this cream color. And other than that, you know, follow the pattern. And this one, a bit heavier though, this one weighs 88 grams. Another hat pattern that I knit multiple versions of is Joji Locatelli's fairly new pattern, A Twisted Affair. So I knit these 4 out of it. This is actually I knit them in this, what order? I think I knit them in that order. This was the first one that I knit. This is the Fiddlesticks Peppin 10 ply in that olivey, sort of great olivey green color that I made an Oslo hat for my son out of. Because I had 5 balls, I had plenty, so that one used about 2 and a bit. This one weighs 78 grams, so this one I got out of less than 2 balls. I did have to cut out 1 repeat of the pattern because with this yarn the row gauge is taller. So I knit it to pattern, the same number of rows, but then as I was knitting I realized it was going to be way too long. So all I did was cut out 1 section of 10 rows. Because it's a free pattern, I can talk freely about it. Other than that, then I followed the pattern. I actually found out that I really do like this, even though my row gauge was taller, so this is taller than the pattern recommends. I like that, particularly when you turn this up, because there's a cable right there. You know, you sort of, to make it look good, you don't want to go past that cable. So you really want to make sure, but you can always go less, but it doesn't look as good if you go more. So my recommendation for this is, you know, make this reasonably long, maybe even longer than you think it might need to be, because you can always turn it up shorter, but you can't really turn it up longer. Yep, so that's all I did with this. This is a very, very quick knit on 5mm needles. Yeah, and obviously 78 grams of yarn. So that, I just love that color. So that was the first one that I made. I made another one out of, so this is actually recommended. I actually have some of this yarn, I may as well show you now. This is the yarn that's recommended, which is this Woolfolk Luft. I bought 2 skeins of it because I am keen to make it out of the recommended yarn. And this is listed like a bulky yarn, and this is listed as a 10 ply yarn. But I do think for this pattern, because just because of the kind of yarn that this is, and you know, the needle size and everything, a 10 ply or a heavy worsted works just fine, or an Aran weight yarn. But you may just, your row gauge might be off a little bit. So, but you know, in terms of the cast on, I think it's 88 stitch cast on. I cast on exactly that number here. This one here, the second one, I used a sport weight and a mohair, which you would maybe think that's not going to equal a bulky yarn, but the sport weight for this one here, this is Rerum Natura Ulysse, which is a very plump woolen spun sport weight yarn. So it's, you know, it's really, really lofty. You can get quite a decent, you know, largish gauge, almost to a DK weight really, I would say, and then a mohair as well. And because I, you know, as I was measuring, I realized this row gauge was taller also. I knit this with less rows, but after, you know, after turning it up and realizing actually that's not as deep a brim as I would like. Oh, and also I changed the pattern to, instead of a 10-row repeat, I made it an 8-row repeat and did the full 5. So this length is totally fine, I'm really happy with, but I wish I had knit this a little bit longer. So I'll just, may as well show you the other one that's similar. Same Ulysse yarn, but I knit more rows here. And then I think I did 9. This one I realized maybe 8 was just a little bit, you know, losing one too many rows in that repeat. And so this one is, I changed the repeat to 9 rows. It's very easy to alter the repeat because in that 10-row repeat, only one of them is a cable row. And because you're knitting in the round, you can drop off an odd number of rows. Normally, if you're knitting flat with cables, you need to drop 2 rows, but because you're knitting in the round, you can drop a single row. So this here was a 9-row repeat. You know, so for me as well, like with hats, I'm not gonna, even though I was a bit unhappy with this being a little bit short, I'm not gonna undo that. Somebody will like it. Maybe a child will wear it and they don't, you know, they don't need a smaller brim, or they won't care if it's folded up a little bit past the, you know, someone will wear it. So I don't mind knitting that and then knitting another one and sort of perfecting the pattern as I go. And hopefully, as I'm talking to you about it, maybe, you know, through me sharing a bit, you'll avoid the mistakes and you'll go straight to a version you're happy with. So yes, I knit this one substantially longer. Yep, so I knit that to about 3 inches before I did the first cable row. I can't remember what the pattern says, but I did 3 inches and then I did the first cable row. And then other than that, followed the pattern. And then the last one, or actually I think this was the third one that I knit, but out of the 4 to show you. This one is also a sport weight yarn and a mohair. This is Skein Yarns Squoosh Fibre Arts Rapture. That's the sport weight yarn, which is very, very similar to Madeline Tosh Pashmina. And the mohair is Skein Yarns, her silk mohair in the colorway Pure Gold. It's so pretty. This color doesn't really suit me, but I like it. Now this one here, because this was a much lighter sport weight yarn, very different to this sport weight. This one just feels a little bit, I mean, it stretches well enough to fit, but I also knit this one on a 5mm needle. I probably, you know, if I was to do it again, I would maybe go to a 4.5mm needle, just go down because it's just feels a little bit open and light. I mean, it's totally fine. Again, I'm not ripping it out, but you know, it just seems a little bit more open than, say, like if you put those two together. See how kind of open those stitches are compared to that one? So I would maybe, if I was going to use that kind of lighter sport weight yarn with a mohair, I'd go down to a 4.5mm needle and then add another multiple. So just a multiple of 8, that's pretty much all you need for this pattern. So yeah, but a great pattern, free pattern, and I obviously already plan to make more because I'm going to try one out of the Luft. And I just think this is actually for any kind of a bulky sort of weight yarn that I'd like to try, like Kamarose Snefnug. I'd maybe get a couple of balls and knit this hat out of it to get a wearable garment, but also get to try out the yarn. And then I'd probably also have, well, not garment, wearable accessory. And then I'd probably even have enough yarn to do like a swatch for gauge or whatever in stockinette. Another hat that I knit multiples of in 2024 is Isolde Teague's Musselburgh hat. And I've got one to show you and one that I gifted. This one that I have to show you is knit out of, it's actually a repeat knit because I did one exactly the same as, not just a repeat knit of the pattern, but the same yarn. I gifted one of these versions away that I'd made but hadn't worn to a friend, and I wanted another one. So this is Neon Madeline Tosh Merino Light in the colorway Neon Peach and Antler, and I like making these where it's sort of half and then you can fold it up and you sort of see this is the brim and this is the body, or do it the other way. This is the body and this is the brim. You know, it's kind of fun. I like it. The pattern, I've actually knit, I don't know how many, I think this was maybe my 18th one. I've knit this a lot, and I'll put in the description a link to a video where I talk, you know, at length about different ones that I've made in different weights of yarn and the sort of lengths that I like. So I knit this on a 3.25mm needle, and I don't know, I'll put a link into the stitch count, the final stitch count that I got to it. But yeah, I really like this hat pattern. It's super, super warm because you've got 4 layers for your ears. The other Musselburgh hat that I knit in 2024, I used Skein Sisters Romance in the colourway Anemone, and that is a really lovely merino silk blend yarn, and it worked perfectly for this hat. I think this hat generally, I like it on because there are so many folds for the brim, I really like it on with a 4-ply yarn. Even though you can use any weight of yarn, I find that even getting up to a sport weight yarn, I just find it a little bit too bulky around this section with the 4 layers. So for me, a 4-ply yarn on a 3.25mm needle, and it uses pretty much a whole skein for the way I like it. Another hat that I made multiples of in 2024 is my Baker's hat by EM Knits, and that's a free pattern. And this first one that I knit is out of some yarn that I got in Japan, Amarisu worsted, and this one weighs 72 grams. So I did a Judy's Magic cast on for a tubular cast on for a 1x1 rib, and then I pretty much followed the pattern. This was the first one that I made. I think that may even be 5 inches of ribbing, and then some straight, and then some pretty standard decreases up to the crown. And yes, I think I've really discovered that with hats, I prefer it, at least on my head, with a folded brim. And I quite like the stretchability of a 1x1 rib. It means if you're making gift knits, that's going to knit, it's going to fit, you know, a lot of head sizes anyway. So that was the first one that I knit. And then the second one that I knit was out of some leftovers, but I think this one, with this one I ended up probably making the ribbing a bit too long for the amount of yarn that I had. Like, I wish I had done a little bit less than that. This one has ended up being more like a child size, because when you fold it up to at least cover the, you know, because you don't really want to fold it up and still see the ribbing. If you fold it up to cover the ribbing, the depth, it's, you know, it's stretchy enough to fit an adult head, but probably just a little bit short in the rise for an adult. So that one's going to a child. I think, you know, that can, because it can fit a range of sizes, it will be fine for a child, but for the rise, and that was just purely a consequence of the amount of yarn that I had left. And this one weighs 71 grams, and that is Madeline Tosh DK. Such a pretty, happy, speckly colourway. All the rest of the hats I only made one version of, so I'll just run through them quickly. The first one is the Stacks hat by Karina Spencer. I have made this before. I used Road to China Light in the colourway Riverstone, and yeah, it's a really lovely pattern. It's got some lace on it, and it's, you know, very easy to memorize the pattern, but I just have discovered that I actually really prefer doing brimmed hats. So I probably wouldn't make this one again, just because, like, it has obviously some ribbing, but it doesn't have, when I say brimmed hats, a folded brim. So, but that one weighs 40 grams. So if you only have a little bit of yarn and you like that look, it is a really lovely and well-written pattern. The next hat I have to show you is 2x2 by Anne Gagnon, and this is a free pattern on Ravelry. Yeah, really, it's a very simple pattern, one page, just one size, but you can easily modify that by increasing in increments of 8. So I just did a long tail cast on, and then I knit one round flat, and then joined in the round so that I could have the nicer edge showing. And then I knit it probably a little bit long, this one. This weighs 86 grams. For future hats, I've knit this and before the decrease is a bit shorter. This one's 9.5 inches to the decreases, and then 2.5 inches of decreases. So that's 12 inches from here to here. I probably prefer it more like around 11 inches. But obviously, you know, you can fold it up and have a larger brim if you like, or you can have a little bit puffy on the top. It's a free pattern, so I can talk about it. It's just got in these 4 sections, paired decreases, so that you decrease 8 stitches every other round until you get towards the end, and then it's 8 stitches every round until you get to 8 stitches and pull it through. So even though there's only one size and only one cast on number, you can 2x2 is very stretchy, and you can modify this quite easily by just adding or subtracting multiples of 8 and using lighter or heavier weight yarn and needles depending on, you know, what yarn you have to use. So yeah, I've just made the one of those, but I'll definitely be making more. Really, yeah, I just really like 2x2. I like knitting it, and it also is really versatile in terms of it will fit a range of head sizes. The next hat is the Jacques Cousteau hat by Lala Pohanpalo, and that is another free pattern on Ravelry, and I knit that out of Madeline Tosh 80-10-10 DK in the colourway Pavement. So this one is a 3x2 rib, so 3 knits, 2 purls, and it's got to be a multiple of 20 stitches. It comes in 2 sizes, And I think I actually even and the cast on is either 120 or 140, but I modified it because I used a slightly heavier weight yarn. This is a DK weight yarn, and I cast on 100 stitches. Similarly, I used the long tail cast on, knit 1 row flat so that I can then turn it up. And then it has these really, I really like the decreases. It only, for this pattern, it needs to be a multiple of 20. And yeah, the decreases are, I think they're actually 4 stitches every round, all the way to the top. What that does create is a little point on the top of the head. You can't really create that look without sort of, I guess, modify. It would end up looking a little bit funny on the top if you tried to decrease more than 4 stitches every round, and if you decrease like that, you will get the point on the top. So with this pattern, you kind of need to accept that that's just going to be, you're going to have that little point. Other hat patterns you can modify a little bit, but with this one, to sort of keep those decreases in that nice line, I think you kind of have to accept you're going to have a little point, and that's just a feature of the hat. And yep, so on this one weighs 74 grams. Almost there with the hats. This one is the Manhattan hat by Tori Yu, which is a 1x1 rib, but then it's got some really unique kind of decreases where you end up with this little duck bill on the top of your hat, on the top of your head. It is a little bit, well, mine certainly is a little bit funky with one side of where the decreases happen, just with the 1x1 rib. I probably need to, if I want to sort that out if I make this again, where I maybe need to wrap my pearls the other way around. Yeah, I'll have to have a little think about that one. You can do the decreases either inside out or right side out. If you do it right side out, you've got to do like purl 2 togethers. And I did just do it right side out. I don't know, maybe next time I'll try it inside out and see if I get a different result. Yep, so the yarn, sorry, I forgot to mention, the yarn that I used is the Rerum Natura Gilead in the colorway CL, which is the same yarn that I used for my Snow Wonder, and the same color. Really lovely, squishy, and a great hat. It's definitely a look, that little duck bill thing on the top of your head. Yeah, I'm not sure about it. So I'd probably think, and I'm not sure that everyone's keen, it's definitely a statement thing. And if you're thinking about giving away hats, you'd want to be pretty sure that the recipient was keen on that look. So this weighs 73 grams, and I did Judy's Magic cast on for a 1x1 cast on, and I did that 1 needle size larger than the hat. So I did that cast on and did the first row Judy's Magic cast on a 4mm needle, and then switched to a 3.75mm needle when I started doing the knit from the front needle, purl from the back needle. And I've got a link to in the description for a video on how to do that. So yep, so that's the Manhattan hat. And the next one that I have to show you is the 815 hat by Statkin Knits, and I knit this out of Madeline Tosh Sport in the colorway Tart. And even though this is a sport weight yarn and I knit it on a 3.5mm needle, the 815 hat is knit for a much heavier yarn on a larger needle, but I just increased the stitch count. So I did, because a lot of hats, it's sort of a recipe, and as long as you sort of go up in the multiples that are required for the decreases, you can just make a cast on more or less stitches. So I cast on 108 stitches for this one. I think I probably could have gone up another 8 because I think it's just a little bit, it's just a bit snug. It's okay. Again, I did Judy's Magic cast on, but this time on a 3.75mm needle, then switching to a 3.5 for the rest. And that hat is 11 inches from the hem to the tip, which I really like. So this hat weighs 79 grams because it's a fairly dense fabric, and also the yarn Madeline Tosh Sport is a worsted spun yarn as opposed to, say, the Gilead, which is a woolen spun yarn, which is much lighter and loftier. So the last 3 hats that I have, I don't have to show, but I'll just put pictures up of them. One of them is a baby hat, Welcome to the World newborn hat, which is a free pattern on Ravelry. And for that one, I used Pirate Pearls Yarns Castaway DK that I bought years ago, and I just had the one skein of it and wasn't quite sure what to do. It only weighs 17 grams. So yeah, but you can definitely get a baby hat out of a very small amount of yarn. The last 2 hats, I didn't follow a pattern. I just cast on what I thought was the right number of stitches. So one of them was a hat made out of the Fibre Company Road to China Light in this cobalt colorway, and I knew when I used that for the Stacks hat, 120 stitches was a good cast on for that yarn for the ribbing, so I just cast on that amount. you know, did some twisted ribbing, and then did, you know, decrease, like knit to a certain length, did decreases every other round until I got to about 40 stitches, and then decreases every round. Pretty standard. And that one weighs 40 grams. The last one, I forgot to get a photo of it when I'd finished it, so I'll just put a picture of it up on the needles up there. And that one was out of Madeline Tosh DK in the colorway Cloak, which is a pretty dark color. And I cast on 96 stitches. I've put, because it's not actually a pattern, I just put exactly what I did in my Ravelry notes, and that one weighs 49 grams. So that's it. That's it for my hats for 2024. So the last few items that I made should go pretty quickly, because even though I made 8 pairs of socks, they're all the same pattern, and that is the Skimmer Socks Revisited by Sheila Toy Stromberg. And I made that out of obviously a range of yarns. I made 8 pairs. 3 of them are gifted, so I have 5 pairs here just to show you briefly. They range between 30 grams of yarn. This is Sandusky Sunday and some leftover from my poppy tea. This one actually looks tiny because it ended up in the washing machine and the dryer, and it felted. So yeah, but it was the same size as the others before it ended up in the washing machine. That one took 30 grams for that pair, as compared to the Madeline Tosh sock this is the colorway Earl Grey. This was my heaviest, and this is 45 grams. And yet they were reasonably, even though like this weighs a lot more than this one, they're roughly the same size. So it's more just like the density of the yarn, and this is a pretty heavy yarn. Like it's quite Madeline Tosh sock is quite a heavy fingering weight yarn. So yes, so it's a very straightforward pattern. I knit all of them on a 2.25 millimeter needle until I get to the ribbing, which is a 2 millimeter needle, and that when you bind off there, you bind off quite tightly, because when the stitches that you pick up is about 120 stitches. It's a free pattern, and there are videos, so it's a really well supported pattern, and especially it's free, right? So. And yeah, these are great. These no-show socks, you might only see the tiny little bit of the back, and you can, they don't fall down into your shoes. So I really love this pattern. That's why I've made so many of them. So this one was Madeline Tosh Earl Grey. This one, as I said, was Sandusky Sunday, which I wouldn't normally use for socks, but I thought, I don't know, it was, you know, I thought I'd either blow a hole in them or they ended up in the wash, so that wasn't a great outcome. Anyway, it doesn't matter. They might fit a child. This one, I really like this one. I can't remember this. I think it's 3 Mums sock yarn. I like this one the most actually, because I like that I used, like, I think I started running out of yarn, and I just used like an extra yarn for the last row and the bind off. And I just think that's really cute. I really like that. So this one here is String Theory Continuum, and I did all of the ribbing using, I think I had like a coordinating skein, but I think I like it best not necessarily when the whole ribbing is in another color, but just the last row and the bind off. And then this one here was some leftovers from my aunt, so I'm not exactly sure what that yarn is. I probably have to ask her. She might recognize the colorway, but it's really lovely and soft, whatever it is. I'll have to ask her actually, because this is probably the one that feels the nicest on my feet. And what I have been doing when I've been wearing these is particularly some yarns that have a really tight twist, like the Madeline Tosh sock. You can really see it in the twist itself. The Purl bumps actually kind of hurt my feet a little bit. So I found with some of the socks, I've actually been, because they're no show anyway, it doesn't matter. And the only bit that you see is the ribbing anyway. I've been wearing them inside out, so that the knit stitches, which are a little bit smoother rather than the Purl bumps, that's been on my foot, and like actually on my on the base of my foot. And I feel like such a princess in the pea, because when I wear them like that, I'm like, oh, that's so much nicer. So yes, obviously I'm a little bit like, I like my feet to be comfortable. Oh well, I like my whole body to be comfortable, but yeah, it's just amazing, particularly your feet. Like if something's irritating you on your feet, like you're standing on it the whole time. So anyway, they're my socks. The last thing that I wanted to show you, because it will be nice and quick now, is I made some washcloths. So the 3 ones that I crocheted, I didn't even take a photo of them. They're already over at my daughter's house, and hopefully she's using them for cleaning and stuff. So they're more like kitchen washcloths. The other ones I've made, but I haven't given to her yet because she hasn't fully moved in. These are more like bathroom ones. This is, so these ones are knitted. I made 4 of these, and only one of them I remembered to do, where is it? One of them I remembered to do what do you call it, like a little crochet loop so that you can actually like hang it in the shower. I don't know, I can't find it. Anyway, one of them has that and the other three don't. This is Debbie Bliss, pretty sure it's Debbie Bliss DK weight yarn. It's a really basic broken rib, like moss stitch on the edges and broken rib in the middle. And I think it used about half of a 50-gram ball. So I've got 4 of them out of 2 balls of yarn. And yeah, these ones are like really nice, and it's a really nice soft DK yarn. It's 100% cotton. So these ones are more like for the bathroom, for washing your face. The ones that were out of, you know, like a peaches and cream or whatever, I can't remember, it was a plain white. They're more for like kitchen scrubbies. And the very last one, may as well just finish it off now. This is the last one that I made, was a crocheted bauble. So I'm learning, I mean, I already knew how to crochet, but I guess I'm trying to get a little bit better with the nomenclature and just understanding like patterns and decreases and increases. And so I made this bauble from a Skillshare pattern, and like it's obviously a very basic bauble, but it was fun. It was fun to make. This is Madeline Tosh. I think this is actually DK in a tart colorway, and this is some KFS Opal sock yarn that's a little bit sparkly. And yeah, so I crocheted that bauble, and that's it. That is, they are my accessory projects for the year. So if you stuck with me to the end through all of those projects, the multiple hats and socks and all of that, thank you so much for watching. I haven't already mentioned what I'm wearing. I should mention this is camisole number 5 by My Favorite Things Knitwear, and I knit it, this wasn't a 2024 knit, I think this is 2023. I knit this out of Volmai's lace gun in the colorway Schwiefel, and I only had a 100-gram ball, so it's a little bit, you know, I knit it as long as I could. I did all of the double knit finishing, and so that then I could finish it off and knit it as long as I could. It's a little bit, it's a, you know, a bit of a lighter weight yarn, a little bit snug. Not sure that I would knit this again. If I did, I would use a slightly heavier yarn and maybe knit it a little bit longer, but this is quite a lot of work for quite a small top. But I do like it. I'm just not, like the racer back, this comes in so much. It's actually got quite a nice, you know, a nice back, but I don't know, I feel like this just comes in just a little bit too much. But it's a nice pattern, you know, yes. But would I knit it again? Not in a hurry, not because it's not a good pattern, but it just is a lot of work for what it is. And I certainly would use a slightly heavier yarn, or if I used this yarn, I would maybe go up a size and I'd use something where I had more than 100-gram ball. Anyway, that's enough on what I was wearing now. I am going to do a video on my 2025 plans. Already we are into 2025, so it does feel a bit funny doing those plans when I'm already into 2025, but yeah, I may as well, like it's obviously for the whole year, so it doesn't matter if we've already started in the year. So yeah, if you haven't already, like if you like the podcast and you want to watch more of what I'm knitting in 2025, if you could subscribe so that then you'll just, you know, I'll turn up in your feed. And if you like the video, if you could like it, that'd be really nice. Yeah, so I hope you're enjoying your knitting and you've got some really great plans, or you've enjoyed what you've made in 2024. You've, you know, used that as information to help you for 2025 as to what you'd like to make next. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you throughout the year.